The Harris-Walz campaign has a problem with men, and they're desperately trying to fix it as the polls indicate razor-thin margins in key battleground states in the U.S. presidential election, which of course is coming up on November the 5th. And it's interesting to note that Republicans have always done better with men, but the Democrats are doing especially bad now. Now, my own thought on this, of course, is that I think they're just bad candidates. Kamala Harris has really never won a major election. She bombed out of the primaries when she was running against Biden for the nomination last time around, essentially got appointed to her position because he had promised to nominate a black woman as vice president, received nonstop bad news as vice president. I remember reading long-form exposés of how bad she was at her job, even in CNN, which gives you an idea of just how bad she must have been. But now that she's been swapped out for Biden, having, again, not run in a single primary and essentially obtained the nomination through background dealings with Democratic power brokers, she's realizing that she needs to introduce herself to the American people. This hasn't gone particularly well either. There was an interview that she did with Fox News where she did so badly, her handlers were going like this behind the scenes and trying to wrap it up as Brett Baier actually asked her tough questions. She just isn't a very clever person, and she's not a very good politician, which is a problem if you're running for president of the United States. So first, the campaign tried to trot out second gentleman Doug Emhoff, who's married to Kamala Harris, as a paragon of the new masculinity, something that we covered in an earlier podcast. And this was widely mocked by many commentators, including myself, because Emhoff, to remind you, abandoned his family after impregnating the nanny. And this means he's scarcely a model of male virtue. Again, the story wouldn't have come up if they hadn't decided to put him forward as an example of what masculinity should be. A more recent allegation published by the Daily Mail that Emhoff actually slapped one of his ex-girlfriends was literally brushed off by the second gentleman, in very legally specific terms it must be noted, as a distraction. And again, it might be a distraction, except for the fact that right now the Democrats are trying to put Emhoff forward as sort of this paragon of masculinity. And they're using him to try and persuade men to vote for the Harris-Walz ticket. They've moved on to some other things as well. They've recruited some celebrities to try reach out to men. They got Barack Obama out on the campaign trail telling black men that they should be voting for Kamala for reasons that are mysterious to almost everyone. And they even recruited Jennifer Garner, who's an actress and the ex-wife of Ben Affleck, to gush unconvincingly, in my view, about how sexy men who supported Kamala are. So to give you an idea of how cringeworthy that is, instead of trying to describe this little speech, I'm just going to play it for you for a moment here.
Listen, I know you've knocked and knocked, and I know you've called and called. I know you've given and given, and you're worn out. But the truth is, you are the front lines. This is it. I mean, I'm looking at these beautiful faces, these women, and at these strong men. Is there anything sexier than a man who is like men for Kamala? But you are the front line of this battle, for lack of a better word. It really is. There are two ways forward, and you guys are going to have a huge voice in how that way is chosen.
So that was Jennifer Garner explaining why men for Kamala are so attractive. I don't think that the most recent ad from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz did her any favors. They recently released an ad allegedly targeted at men, depicting various American masculine stereotypes, gruffly announcing their support for Kamala Harris and, even more importantly, support for abortion. Because at this point, abortion, as I've said before, is one of the only issues Kamala Harris is truly passionate and articulate about, which I've always found to be really sinister and quite disturbing. So they put up this ad, and this ad was supposed to be winning American men over to the Harris-Walz ticket. Now, this has been discussed by some other commentators, but I do think there's an aspect of this that they missed. So let me just run the ad for you for a moment. And then I'll highlight why I think this ad is kind of symbolic of what the Harris-Walz campaign's pitch to men is.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful.
That's not how my mama raised me.
I love women.
I love women who support their families.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
This is what you call making the point with a club and still completely failing. You see those sort of country music vibes there at the end, which is supposed to persuade you in a sort of hello fellow kids way that these are real men. And if you want to be a real man like them, you'll support Kamala Harris, because real men support Harris-Walz and, of course, abortion. And it's interesting. They don't even, not only do they not know how to reach men, they don't even know how to portray traditional masculinity convincingly. And very unsurprisingly, it soon emerged that several of the male actors hired to attract those male voters are gay. And the ad itself was created by a former writer for late night host Jimmy Kimmel. If you're the sort of guy who thinks that these late night hosts are the paragon of traditional masculinity, I suspect we don't have a lot of common ground. But Samuel James, who is a great evangelical commentator, he made a comment, I think, that really captures this on X. He said, quote, "The only thing you need to know about the Not Afraid of Women ad is this. Jimmy Kimmel, by the way, made his career with The Man Show, a show that regularly made male lust and dissipation a source of delight. Secular masculinity is trapped within the porn effeminacy binary." Now, I think James is precisely right. I made this point in my segment on Emhoff previously, because it's interesting to note that even when the Harris-Walz campaign is making an attempt to be aspirational, all Harris has to offer men, when you get all the way down to it, is the agenda of the sexual revolution. That's it. That's all she's got. Vote for me because the women you love or the women you sleep with and don't love may need their babies suctioned out of them by Planned Parenthood. Vote for me because your sex life depends on it. Vote for me because our revolution depends on it. That's the pitch that she's making. That's all her ad offers. Once you cut through all the sort of weird theater kid version of man sits awkwardly on truck tailgate vibes. That's all that's here. And it's basically a more expensive version of Doug Emhoff's campaign. He's partnering with Men for Choice. You can imagine what kind of men those are. I'm sure Jennifer Garner would say that there's nothing hotter than Men for Choice. Nothing, I think, is more admirable in a man than sleeping with somebody and suggesting that she go down to the abortion clinic to get their offspring taken care of once the act of reproduction works the way it's supposed to. I really don't. I don't claim to be able to understand Doug Emhoff's version of masculinity very effectively. Maybe it's because I actually had a good dad. But basically what Emhoff is doing now with Men for Choice is they're urging men to vote for abortion because pro-life laws are, and these are Emhoff's words here, affecting man's ability to plan their lives. I think that if you're going to be the kind of guy who's out there making this case, maybe you shouldn't be the same guy who impregnated a family employee and then that pregnancy mysteriously ended in ways that nobody will discuss. Emhoff has held Men for Choice events in Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, and here's one of his pitches, quote, "I'm talking about this with my other dad friends. I'm talking about it with my son. And it's not just because I also have a daughter. I have a son, and we talk about it and about how this is going to impact him and how he's going to start a family or not." And or not, of course, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because who knows, maybe Emhoff's son will follow in the family tradition and also impregnate a teacher and abandon his family. And then what's he going to do if abortion isn't available? This will interfere with his ability to plan his future. I would suggest that planning should happen at some point before you take your pants off, but this is not the world that Harris-Walz are pitching. I do think he's precisely the right person to make the case for Men for Choice, because he's a great example of what the sexual revolution has done to masculinity. This stuff used to be really implicit. The Democratic Party was the party of freedom, of sexual liberation, but they just said the liberation part, not the sexual part. But with the fall of Roe v. Wade, all of this stuff has become explicit rather than implicit. And I think one of the best microcosmic examples of this is the fact that the porn industry is also pouring cash into getting Kamala Harris elected. So there's now a, quote, hands off my porn campaign, again, funded by the porn industry. I'm not going to use the names of specific sites for obvious reasons. Their campaign has thus far spent $100,000 on ad buys targeting young men on porn sites. And their message is very simple. Vote for Kamala Harris to ensure that you never lose access to your porn. Harris is losing with young men, but if they reach out to enough losers who badly need their pornography, then maybe you can drive male voters out to the polls to vote for Walz. So what's the Harris-Walz ticket selling young men? If you look at what Doug Emhoff is saying about masculinity and men for choice, if you look at the I'm not afraid of women ad they put out that I showed you, if you look at what the porn industry is saying, why it's so important to vote for Harris-Walz, what are they actually offering? It's abortion, porn, and the assurance that masculinity means sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, and however you want. And the government will be there to make sure that if any babies are conceived through casual coitus, you can have those children destroyed in a clinic. What we have now is the purest distillation of a sexual revolution ticket in American history. We've never seen a ticket that is this upfront, that is this brazen about laying it out on the line, saying, if you vote for the other guys, if you don't vote for us, you might lose access to your porn. You might lose your ability to have children conceived through recreational sex killed. You may not be able to essentially live the life that you have been told by the new American dream, the post-sexual revolution American dream that you're entitled to and have been taught this everywhere from the public school system to the entertainment industry. So it is a bold play, I think. They're being very upfront. They're being as honest as they know how to be, which is saying something. The gloves are off, and so are the masks. Thanks everyone for watching that clip. If you'd like to check out our content on other platforms, you can find us on Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you get your content. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel and spread the clip around if you like the content. Thanks so much.